Hello and welcome to E233. I'm your instructor, Gregory Myers. In this video, we're going to take a look at our student course registration system demo again, and particularly we're going to focus on the get student function that can be found in our StaticArray.h. This video assumes that you've watched some of the earlier videos in this series, and specifically, it would be helpful for you to go ahead and watch the isAStudent function first before attempting this particular function. This video also will assume that you have access to your .h files as well as a copy of our students.csv. So let's go ahead and jump into it. We'll go ahead and look at our StaticArray.c and our get student function. As I mentioned, it is going to be very similar to our isAStudent function, with the main difference being is it has an additional argument out here, a by reference or by address pointer to a student that allows for us to update a student structure when we have found a matching student in the students array. The idea is that we're going to use the student ID to find the matching student in the students array, and then simply use the student, singular student, then to bring the values back to the calling function. So what we'll do is we'll update the student then so that we can see what values are associated with the given student ID. So much like in the isAStudent video, we're going to need a temporary variable or an index variable that allows for us to loop through each one of the elements in our students array. We're going to set up a while loop, so we want to go ahead and initialize our index equal to 0. We're going to use a while loop because we want to be able to exit the while loop as soon as we find our first matching student based off of the student ID. So what we're going to have is then two conditions here. Our first one is simply going to be as long as our index is less than our count, and then our results equal to 0. And our results are essentially going to act as a found flag. And so that basically, as long as results are equal to 0, we have not yet found a match, which then means we want to have an if statement inside of our while loop that will allow for us to compare the current student's ID with the student ID that was passed as the third argument. Once again, very similar to how we did this in the isAStudent. So we'll use our own string compare function. We'll pass to it the particular student's Blazor ID, or rather the student ID. In this case, it's going to be students square brackets index, and we'll use their student ID, and we're going to compare that to the one that was passed that we want to search for. And much like in the isAStudent, we will simply do case insensitive as our third argument because we probably don't care if the student ID was capitalized. And if there are no differences between the two, then a match has been found. Under the else statement, we simply want to keep looking. And then either way, we want to go ahead and increment our count. Now in the true branch of the if statement, if a match has been found, we simply want to say results equal to 1. Now, in the isAStudent function, we were done at this point. Basically, we would escape out of the while loop, and we would simply return back a 0 or a 1 if we had found a match. But in this particular case, what we want to do is we want to go through the extra step of copying the fields in that current student over to that temporary student. And to do that, we simply do a field by field copy. Well, starting with the student status, so student.student status will be equal to the value of the student's square brackets index, and then that particular student status. In other words, the status of the student that matched the Blazor ID. Now, we would like to be able to do the same thing with our first name and with our ID and so on, in other words, with our strings. So we'd like to be able to do something like this. However, though, with strings, we can't simply do a equal sign. Instead, we want to leverage our string copy function that copies to the destination from the source. We'll do this once again. We'll have a string copy, student, and we'll do the first name. And then as the source, it'll be students with an S, square brackets, index, dot, student, first name. And we can repeat this now for the middle initial and the last name, or essentially all of the fields that we would find in our student type in our scrs.h. Please note, you'll be doing the exact same thing for your Git course and your Git registration. And so our second, our third field, our fourth field will be our middle initial. And then finally our last name. At this point, we will have not only set our return value, but we will have also updated our student so that then the calling function can see the fields associated with the matched student. So let's once again go ahead and build this. We'll get an opportunity to test this function later. Hopefully you found this video useful. As always, if you have any questions, comments, or concerns, don't hesitate to email me. Thank you for watching.